Hi, everyone. My name is Kristina, and I'm from Cornell. I'm part of the Food Systems and Global Change Lab. We are a group of climate scientists and food security specialists, and recently we're also delving into this alternative protein world. So I'm very glad to be here with you today. My colleague Mario Herrero, he would have loved to be here as well, but alas. So the buzz around alternative proteins, it's very hard to ignore. Whether good or bad, I would argue that us sort of scientists, regulators, policymakers, for a lot of the time we were playing catch up. The narrative was largely defined by the industry. But right now, I think we're at a more pivotal moment. I would argue almost a tipping point where we can really help to shape these narratives. Now, conventional animal-sourced foods, they are so vast and varied. It can be very hard to compete. But these alternative proteins, they're super diverse as well. They come from different corners of the evolutionary tree. The benefits that they offer is pretty incredible. They've expanded the very definition of what protein can look like. And whether we consume them whole or use them as ingredients, I've even heard of many non-food uses, they are versatile, one thing is for sure. But the story of alternative proteins, it actually spans centuries. Many speakers have mentioned this over the past few days. Lots of the things that we're calling alternative, they have been staples for communities for generations, for centuries. And truly, innovation has accelerated in the past few decades and allowed us to have a set of pretty incredible analogs, replacement options that taste and look and feel like the real thing. An interest in alternative proteins, it's also grown a lot in the past few years. I think that this signals opportunity, right? I think this signals opportunity for education, for better policy making, for investment, subsidies, I would even argue. It's gone from being a very niche topic just 15 years ago to convening this very room of experts, and doing so at many other conferences every year that goes by. And the public enthusiasm for alternative proteins, it's also mirrored in science and policy. What does this look like? More systematic reviews every day. We have updated food pyramids. I would say that research it's catching up. And 1/3 of today's food-based dietary guidelines actually mention plant-based alternatives. In addition to that, I don't need to tell you that the field is just bursting with studies every month. I see so many constantly coming out. And it's also worth saying that what was once a little controversial has now become common sense. Less meat, more gain, it's better for the planet, it's better for public health. That said, of course, access to animal-sourced foods in many parts of the world, they can be the difference between malnutrition and dietary adequacy. But in places where consumption is very high, I would argue that less meat can help slash emissions, it can sort of free up land, it can give us longer and healthier lives. Now, to me, viability, it's more than just a good idea. I think this really means delivering on promises. So this conference is giving me a lot of hope, and I hope it's doing the same for you as well. But I also recognize that I'm in a room full of people who understand the trade-offs. Plant-based alternatives, things like Impossible Meat or Beyond Beef, they are formulated to mimic the taste and the nutritional profile of meat, but not all proteins are created equally. Even when the labels say otherwise, a closer look shows that beneath the nutrition panels, there can be a lot of invisible losses and other bioactive compounds that our bodies require, things like phytochemicals and metabolites, the very things we need to absorb the nutrition that we eat. These things don't always appear on the back of the pack. And price tags, they can turn, revolutionary foods into inaffordable luxuries. On a pound-per-pound basis, plant-based meat is twice as expensive as beef. It's 3 times more expensive than pork. It is 4 times more expensive than chicken. So bridging the gap here is going to be key to making this accessible to the masses. I think we all know that after the novelty factor wears off, people go back to their old habits, and especially when our wallets are at stake. Of course, one person's delicacy is also another person's hard no. In some parts of the world, alternative proteins like insects or cell-based meat, they may not even be considered food. Some religions categorically forbid these things. And I don't need to tell you that, cultural values, tradition, these things are just as important as nutrition and taste. And as we learned yesterday, over the course of many presentations, food safety is more than just a checkpoint for alternative proteins. I would say it is the very foundation of consumer trust. I would say it's the way that we can scale technology sustainably. Food safety creates the runway for these things to grow. But at the end of the day, we are butting up against some pretty stiff planetary boundaries. Alternative proteins, they have to thrive in a world where doing more with less is a non-negotiable. I learned Tuesday night during that really great presentation at the cocktail that when resources shrink, creativity can also grow. So I'm just like the rest of you. I'm on a search for definitive answers. Are alternative proteins sustainable? But we know that the story is much more complicated than this. There's nuance. There's actually many stories to tell. Public health, risk management, economics, what will people eat, what will people buy? And I think we're all here to sort of discover more about all of these domains. There's no single metric or indicator that can capture the full story. But I'm also here to tell you that alternative proteins, what we call alternative proteins, whether it's cutting-edge products or sort of time-tested staples, they are far more than just a trend. I think that they're a cornerstone of our future food systems. I think that their role is going to be front and center in devising sort of solutions to our sustainability challenges. I think they will completely redefine the way that we produce and consume foods. Now, all of you know that food production is a heavy hitter when it comes to climate. Livestock and aquaculture alone contribute to over 30% of our food-based emissions. Now, this creates an urgent call for action, and I think alternative proteins can really pave the way. That said, we have a bit of a dilemma. Population is set to grow by 2 billion in the next 25 years. The demand for protein is going to completely skyrocket. And the experts keep telling us, eat less red meat, eat much less red meat. So I don't think this is just a numbers game. I think it's time to completely rethink how we do protein. And in a world of finite resources, efficiency is king. Alternative proteins, they promise to deliver high nutritional value while, cutting down on environmental impact. And it's not just about emissions, it's not just about carbon, this is about less resources, it's about protecting our ecosystems. It's about feeding the planet while giving our environments a much needed break. And the impact, not all foods leave the same mark. Some tread lightly and some have much heavier footprints. but shifting our diet towards low-impact whole foods, things like beans, whole grains, nuts, seeds. I think these are simple yet powerful ways to curb emissions without compromising on nutrition. And of course, compared to traditional animal-sourced foods, plant-based analogs, things like Beyond Beef, Impossible Burger, yes, they are, more processed. They require more inputs, but they still pack a punch when it comes to sustainability. And of course, as you can see, and as we've been told by other speakers, swapping meat for things like tofu or tempeh, it's not just impactful, it is totally transformative. I think that, whether it's land, whether it's water, whether it's fossil fuel, the math makes alternative proteins a no-brainer, at least for sustainability. And of course, it's not just that they can feed us, it's that they protect fragile ecosystems. They prevent things like deforestation in the Amazon, overfishing in what's left of our coral reefs. So whether it's sort of delicate terrestrial habitats or marine biodiversity, the shift to alternative proteins, it can leave some measurable impact, especially in things like species richness, the diversity of sort of the flora and the fauna we have. But I would say there's also intangible impacts that it can have, things like ecological balance and harmony. And I'm very glad to see that our behavior is already shifting. Things that were once alternative are now becoming staples in our kitchens. Plant milk, even just a few decades ago, that this was a niche product. It has now completely transformed aisles of our grocery stores, especially here in Europe. I'm very impressed. And I think this momentum, it gives us a very rare opportunity. I think it's time to scale what works, but I think it's also time to push the boundaries a little bit. Now, in the world of nutrition and food systems, the conversation has shifted. It's moved from healthy diets to healthy diets from sustainable food systems. And the writing is on the wall. Alternative proteins, they should take up more room on our plates. One could argue that other countries can actually show us the way. There's countries that already rely on pulses and legumes as staples. There's countries that have perfected the art of making them delicious. I saw on the board up there outside, somebody wrote, "More flavor, please." There's parts of the world where populations have a religious mandate to consume zero animal source foods. Parts of India, parts of Ethiopia, these places have made culinary masterpieces out of the humble bean. So I think that food traditions from these countries, they actually hold the key to making alternative proteins not so alternative for the rest of us, definitely much more appealing. And these regions, they're not just consuming, they're shaping global markets. They're pioneering product innovation. They're setting trends that ripple across our food systems. And yes, cooking chickpeas and lentils regularly, there's a bit of a learning curve, but there's good news. These foods are affordable. They are nutritious, and they are a net gain for the environment. They fix much needed nitrogen into our soil. So my question to you is this: when are we gonna get more of this stuff into our bowls? I do wanna say that modern alternative proteins are nothing short of miraculous. They are undoubtedly part of the solution. But when we consider the complicated question of how do we eat healthy while protecting the planet, maybe simple works too. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And as we invest in groundbreaking innovations like cell-based meat and precision fermentation that can give us real tasting cheese, I would also urge us to not overlook the abundance we already have. Beans, peas, lentils. As we design our future food systems, I think that they should get a front row seat. And of course, let's not forget that feed systems are a critical piece of the puzzle. Much of today's farmed salmon is actually soy from the Amazon, soy that fuels deforestation, soy that threatens the very lungs of our planet. Feed systems, are very interconnected. So sustainability in one place can depend on responsible sourcing in another. And of course, lots of alternative proteins can rewrite the rule book on animal feed. They can lower costs, they can reduce emissions, they can open doors to more sustainable production. Things like black soldier flies, super nutrient dense and efficient, great for aquaculture. Spirulina, not a superfood just for us. This can also boost health and fertility in the sort of cows we graze and the chickens that lay our eggs. Peas, fava beans, all of these are great alternatives for cattle who rely on resource-intensive soy. And of course, what is maybe our trash, our agricultural byproducts, this can be treasure for the animals that we feed. This can help, with closed-loop systems that we want to design. But when we talk about sustainability, we have to mention the social dimension. We just do. When you look at how much of the world agriculture employs, the fact that more than 80% of people in some countries work in agriculture, you can see how even small impacts or small changes in our food systems can trigger threats to people's daily subsistence. Livestock sector supports almost 2 billion low-income people, 70% of which are women. So yes, there can be negative impacts. There can also be opportunities. Seizing them depends on a lot of things. The cell-based meat industry is a cutting-edge field. I think a lot of people are eager to join the effort. And it's fantastic to see that enthusiasm. And pardon this outdated map. The field is growing so quickly, I can't keep up. But, many of the innovations that we see here, they're fantastic, but they're also rooted in high-income countries, and it makes sense. You need capital, you need, advanced infrastructure. Those things are a must. But this also means that, it's challenging for the global South to be part of the conversation and of course, share in the benefits of these innovations. On the other hand, plant-based proteins, this is a global enterprise. These crops are feeding the world, they're driving economies, super diverse production network that we have here. And I think it proves that we don't have to start from scratch, right? We already have a very solid foundation that we can build on. And there's people behind these superfoods. The livelihoods of farmers, of workers, everyone across the supply chain, it has to remain central to any sustainability effort or any food system transition that we dream up. So today we're going to talk about sustainability. But when we do, we have to find a middle ground between many things. We need harmony. People, planet, progress, profit, all of it has a role. But I'm really looking forward to today's talks. I think that the speakers we have lined up for you today, I think they're going to delve into a lot of these dimensions and really give it the deep dive that they deserve. So I'm running out of time, and I'm just going to wrap by saying this. It's 2024, almost 2025, and eating less meat should not feel like punishment. Here's to the hope that alternative proteins, in whatever form, can help make our sustainable choices both enjoyable and effortless. Thank you very much.